Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Know If Your Job Search webinar series. My name is Linda, and I am the marketing specialist here at Jobscan. If you're unfamiliar with Jobscan, we are a Seattle-based company dedicated to building the best online tools for job seekers. And this is our second year of doing the Know If Your Job Search webinar series. And no matter where you're at in your job search today, we hope this event helps you in some way. Today, we have Evangelia Leclaire presenting on how to create a resume that stands out. All these sessions will be recorded, so if you miss any that you would like to attend or just want to rewatch them, you can find those on our YouTube channel in the near future, and you can also find those at jobscan.co/no-fear as we upload them. Before I hand it off to Evangelia, I'd just like to go over some general rules of the road. So we recommend that everyone have their view set to active speaker mode in Zoom. And to ensure that everyone has a good experience free of distraction, you'll notice that we're muting you and keeping your video off for the duration of the session. But with that being said, we'd still like to hear from you. So there is a text chat feature in Zoom where you can submit any questions or comments to the presenter throughout the webinar. And myself and my colleague John will be monitoring the chat and saving relevant questions for Evangelia until the end of her presentation. We do ask that you try and keep your questions to a general nature and related to today's topic, which is resumes. Please also save any networking or link sharing until after the Q&A session, because we do want to reserve the chat for questions. One more thing before I hand it off, we are offering 20% off of our Jobscan Premium membership for new and free members, and you can find that promo link in the presentation today. But with that being said, I am excited to turn it over to today's presenter, Evangelia Leclaire. Evangelia knows that finding work you love can be soul-sucking, so she's vowed it to keep it purposeful, productive, and fun. She has over 15 years of experience helping thousands of professionals build careers that fuel life's dreams, and she is a top-rated master coach with The Muse with over 150 five-star reviews. Her work has been featured in Fast Company, Business Insider, The Muse, and Fairy God Boss. Evangelia has a knack for inspiring people to take action through organized systems, processes, and resources that drive results and build relationships. She's well known for delivering high-touch, high-impact services and helping people energize their lives and careers. Evangelia, thank you for taking the time to present today, and feel free to take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Linda and John, for having me join the Jobscan No Fear Summit. This is going to be an incredible week, and I am so grateful for each and every one of you who have shown up today to learn about how to create a standout resume. I will say I have been personally leveraging Jobscan's tools and resources to help clients, and I wouldn't be able to do it without Jobscan. So not to plug, but it's a huge, I've been using them probably since the beginning, almost 4 years now. So I'm excited to share with you my tips and inside ways. So here we go. So many of you, give me one moment, are here. If you are rusty at resume writing and you can use an expert's opinion, you might feel like your resume is irrelevant, it's outdated, it's generic, or it's purely poorly worded. You want your resume to best represent your experience and tailor it to jobs that interest you. you feel like your resume might be going into a black hole, or you want a concise and cohesive resume that captures the attention of a recruiter and is ATS friendly. Now my editing hat is on and I see I have a period within a bullet point and it's bothering me. So we're constantly editing. All right, here we go. So what we're going to cover today is reasons to rock your resume, how to beat the ATS system and grab the attention of a recruiter, how to write a cohesive and concise resume. You're going to see some resume formats that I personally leverage, and you're going to hear some resume do's and don'ts. And I'm going to give you a sneak preview into Jobscan and how a bit of a before and after of a resume revision that I've used leveraging Jobscan. So ATS and reader-friendly resume, that is the goal. We are trying to meet the needs of the human eye and the applicant tracking system. Now, an applicant tracking system, according to a study by Jobscan, is typically used by about 98% of Fortune 500 companies. A lot of smaller, fast-growing businesses are using applicant tracking systems as well. And it's basically a tool that a recruiter or a hiring manager can use to help field, prioritize, and parse out relevant resumes to the type of job candidate that is sought after for the position. And that is at its basic form how it functions. And it's something that a recruiter and a hiring manager typically will use to help them identify relevant candidates. The reader is the recruiter, the hiring manager, the headhunter, anybody who has their eyes on your resume. And so what we get to do when we are revising a resume is really keep the lens of those two in mind, understanding that they're relevant keywords. We want a resume to be cohesive and concise, and we don't want to certainly derail the reader with irrelevant details. Now, years ago, almost 15 years ago, maybe 20 years ago, when I first started studying resume revision techniques, I really took this man named Brad Karsh's words to heart. And I always use this example. If you still read magazines, when you're flipping through a magazine, and let's say you knew that you wanted to buy a specific perfume, you're really only going to see the ads for that type of perfume, or let's say it's nail polish or something. Those ads might stand out more to you than all the hundreds of other ads that are within a magazine. So very similar concept. We try to adapt, mirror our language to what would be most relevant to the reader, recruiter, hiring manager, and of course the ATS. And that's Brad Karsh who gave me that metaphor. How recruiters read resumes. Now, according to a study by the Ladders, recruiters spend 6 seconds reviewing a resume. So that's why we want to make every second count. And I'm going to show you what the Ladders depicted, which is the gaze trace. It's the path to a human eyes reading a resume. And that's why within that, we want to include relevant keywords that match up to the resume's requirements within the job section. And I'm going to say these words with integrity. So here's my off the cuff experience. A lot of people, when I finesse and revise their resume, many people feel like, oh, whoa, does that really represent me? Have I really done that before? Like, because we're using words that are very that match up to what the reader's familiar with and what the job description might be familiar with. And they really sound well esteemed. And so sometimes it feels like a little bit of a stretch for people to, especially when I'm working with newer younger professionals, it feels uncomfortable for them to speak of themselves that way. So as long as if it is of integrity to what you've done, it is okay to finesse some of those words as long as it's of integrity, meaning that you're not lying. So include achievements that also indicate the impact, scope, and metrics. And we're going to go into details of what that looks like in a few slides forward. So here's the gaze trays. Basically, this shows a heat map that shows the stickiest section of a resume. This is broken into 2 pages. So what you're seeing that is where the human eyes land on the most is that first top section of the resume, which is often where we or some individuals would put an objection, which is a little bit outdated of a term now, the objection, the objective, or a qualification summary. Then what you see next as most stickiest is the human eye is reading your most relevant experience, your most recent experience. They scan over the second page. And what's also interesting, as shown here as stickiest, is your education. And I think that's just, it often is of human nature to have that curiosity of, where'd you go to school? And sometimes it might be, how long ago was it that you graduated? All right, so that's what we covered here, how recruiters read resumes, the stickiest being the qualification summary. I'm going to share with you an example of some of the qualification summaries that I've created. And my goal when I create a qualification summary at a very high level is to have an impact statement that one can reuse. Let's say if they were in a business networking international meeting, BNI, or if they were to introduce themselves. And it's that 1-2 punch statement that often helps showcase the scope, sometimes the niche, and the niche of what you do. All right, so going into some generals that you may know of resume don'ts. Not necessary to include your home address. It's not recommended to include images, text boxes, or fancy fonts, or your photo in a resume, especially in the United States. It's not recommended to include info that could lead to biases about your age and or personal details. Now, I'm speaking in generalities here. Often I might get a question from individuals who have affiliated themselves with a political organization or a religious organization. And if that is of integrity to your brand and you feel like you would be compromising yourself by excluding that type of detail, especially if it was an organization that you care and continue to care to be involved with and known as part of your personal brand, I would, on a personal level, I don't encourage people to compromise on their selves, on things that they've taken a stand for in their lives. So that's my personal, but it is recommended, knowing that we do live in a society where there are biases and unconscious biases, to not include info that could lead to biases. Don't include irrelevant or outdated work experience that could be 15 or 20 years out. And anything that just would, again, derail the reader from seeing you as relevant and perhaps them going out down a rabbit hole of, that's interesting, or tell me more about that, which might dilute the true relevance of what you can do for the company. Don't have more than 6 bullets per experience. Don't use a font size less than 10.5. I'm sure there's a lot of other don'ts that you can find if you continue to read on the internet, but for the sake of really getting to the meat and potatoes of showing you some more details of what a resume could look like from a resume writer's perspective like myself, we're going to move forward. Resume do's. Custom tailor your resume for every opportunity you pursue. And I believe that once you've adopted a very nicely revised resume that has adopted some of these best practices, you could custom tailor your resume, particularly that qualification summary section at the top, which is the most stickiest, which is the most landed on. And it shouldn't really take you more than 15 to 20 minutes to do that for every opportunity you pursue, especially if you're leveraging a tool, a platform like Jobscan. Use familiar fonts, spell 1 to 10 out, numbers greater than 10 are written numerically, add pops of color and bold relevant text, make it concise and easy to read, write achievement statements within your experience section to explain the impact, scope, and metrics. Oh, another period. Wonderful. Resume formats. So there's the stacked one-page resume, which is the chronological order. A lot of times we get that question from individuals. Does it matter if I have a two-pager? No, it doesn't matter really if you have a two-pager, if you are providing and need to provide substance and relevance to what you have done. You know, do a lot of people like to use a one-pager? Yes, but if it doesn't enable you to adequately depict your experience, it is okay if you go to two. What I personally don't like is when it's a 1 1/4 resume or one, so things of that sort. So stacked two-page resume, use if you have 10 years or more of experience. Going on to the other type of format, we have 2-column, 1-pages or 2-page resumes. I tend to, you know, think that if you are in a creative field, I see those in more of a 2-column, 1-page resume format. These are the 3 that I tend to toggle between when I write resumes. This is pretty obvious, so I'm going to skip us forward. And actually, I will give you, actually, and let me pause here and share a bit of, do a little bit of a show and tell here, because I'm sure many of you have seen resumes and it's always like, well, what does she do? And how does hers look like? So let me just share my other resume that I want to show you. One moment. Okay, 1 second. Okay, I'm not sure if you could see that, so I might need to just get X out of it for a second.
Thanks for being patient with us here, folks.
Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes, there we go.
Okay, is it product manager or product? Okay, here we are, product officer. So you could see that. Okay, let me scroll up to the top. So this is what I mean of a qualification summary. And I'm actually introducing something new here that I haven't shared before. But so what I do typically is if I know somebody's going after a specific title and it is of integrity to what they've done before, such as in this case, he was a chief product officer. I had it listed up at the top. Why? Because going back into indexing in one's memory, relevancy, very similar to if you're flipping through a magazine, you see that perfume that you wanted or that specific color that you are allured by. So that healthcare tech products, again, the more I can specify the niche that is relevant and be of integrity to what this individual has done before, it makes it stickier. An impact statement. This one's a little bit generic, but it works and it is all encompassing for what he is seeking to do and what is relevant to the type of roles that he's going after. Again, calling out some of those relevant terms, bringing in, this person was okay with putting 20 plus years. Sometimes I like to mirror and match what is in the job description. So if somebody's asking for 10, I will put 10 plus years versus the 20 plus, just to not rule somebody out by some type of biases that may or may not exist. Here's where I start to get more into the niche that is relevant and that would be relevant to the specific opportunity that this person is going for. So I wrote in B2B C experience in SaaS and marketplace healthcare products. So again, the qualification summary, the more I talk about relevance in terms of impact and in terms of niche, the stickier it will be. And then I put in some of the keywords here. This is more of a executive level. So I do include a section where I've written expertise in. Why? Because this person has so much experience. And if I know there's only 10 seconds or less, I want to call out what would be most attractive to a prospective employer, which are things like this person positioned a specific company for acquisition. He led 16 people. These were some of the most accomplished key performance metrics that he led. So that is a section that I often include for individuals that are at a more advanced level. So that's that. I'm going to X out of this and get back to the presentation. One moment. Okay. And I am going to press this. Here we go. All right, so that showed you a little bit of what the components of a stacked resume looks like and why I wrote here expertise in. I do have that section because again, it brands that person is branding himself without the reader having to assess who this person is and what their core competencies and what their greatest achievements are. It told me at the top. Revise with the recruiter's point of view, which ultimately is why I like to leverage both the job description as well as a tool like Jobscan to understand what is the essence and the tonality of how this job description is written. Oftentimes, if the job description is quirky or if it has certain words that emphasize energy, that perhaps might not be standard to a typical job description, I do add a bit more creativity to mirror the tone of the job description. And I also leverage Jobscan to understand what are the keywords, what are the phrases that we can trickle in to your resume to also make it through an applicant tracking system as well. And I do focus on the stickiest sections first. All right, so that's where I've mentioned Jobscan a few times to identify keywords to use in your qualification summary and throughout your resume. And the awesome thing about Jobscan is that it gives you two fields when you first begin that enable you to populate your entire resume into one field and then populate a job description into the other field. And then what it will do is it will read it and cross-reference what are some of the keywords that would be relevant for an ATS and for the reader. So that's where I'm going to get to now, showing you a little bit about that and what that looks like. And just I know that Jobscan later on this week is going to have more of a demo and a how-to. Is that right, Linda?
Yes, correct. We will be doing a webinar on how to use Jobscan in 2 weeks.
Awesome. Everyone should sign up for it. And I'm going to just show you things at a high level. So give me one moment so I could set up the correct screens. All right, so now you should be able to see Jobscan. So you go to jobscan.co, and Jobscan has so many different cool features and articles related to resume and cover letter and LinkedIn, and it even has resume templates on there. And what you'll do is there is a section called Scan, and obviously Jobscan gives you some abilities to use Jobscan for free if you wanted to use a certain amount of resume revisions. I think that there is an upgrade. I have the upgraded version. And so here's what the screen looks like when I begin to cross-reference an existing resume to a job description. So I populate the existing resume in here, and then I populate the desired opportunity here. And then at the very bottom, you click on scan. I'm just showing you the very basics here. And what I love about this, but it's also I think the right word is Achilles heel, because I guess, scoring gives us all like one of those, got to get the highest score, is it scores you. It scores you in terms of match rate. So as it stands right now, this person's resume, without having been revised and based off of the type of opportunity she wants to pursue, is at a 32% match rate. And what I love about this is you can improve your score, and Jobscan sections things out so that you can understand what aspects, components of your resume you can then begin revising. So if you go into applicant tracking system findings, it will give you information that isn't perhaps increasing your score. So things like adding the jobs companies' names would help increase the score. Things like it has an X right now because I'm missing 5 important high value skills. So we'll get down to that section. That's the other thing. It allows you, when you click on it, it will toggle you down to the section that shows you the key hard skills and other types of skills that you may be missing, that it is recommending you add on based off of this job descriptions, just based off of the job description. It also is saying the date formatting could be improved by using any one of these formats. So it matches these recruiter findings in terms of word count and having measurable results on your resume. Remember, including achievement statements in terms of metrics, indicating the scope and impact of your achievements. And then it also measures the tone of your resume as well. So this is where we then see, what core competencies, what key skills are in the job description that perhaps I get to include in my resume revision and position appropriately in a qualification summary and within the experience section, if it is indeed of integrity to what I've done. So words like client relationships, presentation, technical, and then it shows some predicted skills, etc. Then if we go down to soft skills, it's showing us management, relationship building, organization, cross-functional teams. So these things are things that we get to position up at the top. And if we want to really increase our scores, we can use some of these words within our resume revision. Other keywords, Eventry, I think that's the name of the company. So generally speaking, when you go on Jobscan, it would say that add more missing skills to increase your match rate to 80% or above. I'm just going to be honest with everybody. I would go nuts if I tried to get, above a 70%. There are diminishing returns to really spending so much time on trying to add and keyword junk your resume. And sometimes it might even lose readability if you're not appropriately finessing a resume for the human eye. So this is a wonderful barometer to help you get to a point where you are ATS friendly and reader relevant. But there is more value in you getting to a point where you're perhaps at a 70% and now also engaging in conversations with people and leveraging some of the other tricks and trades to opening up doors for yourself within companies that interest you by, frankly, networking. So this is a wonderful tool, and I use it every time I revise a resume, but I also know at some point I got to stop. Otherwise, I'm not doing myself or my client a service. All right, so let me stop sharing there, and I'm going to just quickly share with you another example of before and after of a resume. Several years ago, I did a tutorial using Jobscan. Yeah, and somebody just wrote in the comments, now I'm reading the comments, and even with 99%, I did not proceed with an interview, which is crazy. Once I got 94% while matching. It's fantastic. You absolutely can get to above 80%. It takes a lot of finessing and a lot of time. And I do my best to get there. It's just at some point, it's almost like my priority is coming up with a catchier qualification summary. So I'm reading through the sections. Wonderful. Okay, so let me go back to a little bit of a before and after. Let me share screen. One moment. Okay, so share again. So this was a resume that I got, and I did a tutorial on many years ago using Jobscan. And this is what I got beforehand, and it was at a 30%. She was looking for a marketing manager role for LATAM markets. And so I compared and contrasted the resume to a job that I put in Jobscan, and she was at 30%. And then leveraging some of the tactics that I told you and that I'm now going to show you, I was able to get above an 80%. I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to show you what the after looked like. One moment. Okay, share. One moment. Thank you so much for your patience. All right, where'd it go? I just had it. Here we are. Okay, so this is a little bit, like I said, I leveraged this approach where I wanted her to be relevant because she didn't have a lot of direct relevance. So I had to leverage key impact statements that I knew that they sought in a candidate. And I began to tweak some of the scope of impact and what they were seeking. And I included some of her most relevant experience up at the top, because if I didn't, it would have gotten lost. So worked with Latin American markets on several projects, including localizing products. And then I called out the companies that she worked at for market expansion within Latin American markets. And then I called out these most relevant keywords from Jobscan, and I supported it with some of the scope of what she's done. And that, doing all that work and having a little bit of a hybrid of a experience section that spoke about the scope of her impact and had achievements in there, I was able to get us to, I think it was above an 80%. So that is an example. Give me a moment. I'm just going to stop sharing. And I wanted to see if I can share another example. Yeah, how about we take questions now? Because I showed you two different examples and I walked you through Jobscan. Does anybody have any questions? John?
Yeah, we see a lot of questions coming through the chat. Keep them coming and we'll try to address as many as we can. But let's see here. We have a question from Austin asking, so if you are only showing relevant experience, what should we do about gaps in employment? For example, some of his work experience is not necessarily relevant for the job that he's applying to, but then he would have a gap in his resume.
Yeah, that's a really good question. As far as what, it depends on the chronological order. So I don't want to speak generalities to this specific scenario, but typically I have a section for like other work experience, and I will include what is least relevant in a collapsed manner in other work experience, in the other work experience section.
Yeah, that's a great point. So you would just have like your relevant work experience up top and then other work experience.
Right. And most of the time it is within chronological order because I don't like employers having to figure it out. But in that specific scenario, it might just be ensuring that you've really enhanced the qualification summary and expertise in and your most relevant experience. And then that other section would help explain some of the gaps.
Great. So Christopher is asking if you could clarify what you meant by not including information on your resume that could lead to biases. So I think you mentioned like if you were affiliated with a religious or political organization, could you clarify that a little bit?
I mean, what leads to bias is age, politics, religion, sexual orientation, I mean, honestly, those are things that typically people hold unconscious biases on. So I tend to follow the advice of understanding the reality, which is that there's a lens that people tend to look through, which leads to bias. And I have to be cognizant of that. And I have to ensure that individuals are cognizant of the fact that biases exist. Yet my personal belief is that it is important for you to be in an organization that embraces who you are, including your age, including whatever you believe in. And if that is something that is important to you to include within your resume, and I'm not talking about age, but I'm talking about if I worked at a specific organization that was important to me, whether it was maybe it was perceived to be a religious organization, I might choose to include it or not to include it, me personally, and I would always divert to the client while making you aware that there could be potential biases based off of that. And have you make the decision, well, understand that there's biases and somebody may or may not choose to move forward with you as a candidate because of what you choose to post. That could be a bias.
Right.
So that's really, I don't have anything more detailed than that to share.
Thank you. We have a couple people asking about metrics on your resume. So why do you think metrics need to be included in resumes? And what if, someone doesn't necessarily have things like performance evaluations or metrics they can look back upon?
Yeah, such a good question. And this is where I've also realized over the years that most people have, but they're just not aware of what it is. Key performance indicators could be anything that you were measured on as it relates to your role. So if it's within graphic design, it might be that you perhaps weren't aware of what those metrics were, but perhaps your design led to some type of conversion on a landing page that was quite valuable. So in some cases, I would challenge individuals to think deeper about how their role impacted the organization and or teams at large, and how their role led to key performance metrics of other organizations, and put a tie-in to it. So oftentimes, to answer your question, it's about helping you dig deeper to understand that there may be a metric that you're just not aware of. And let's explore if we can find it and then tie it in. And then the other thing is that in some cases, there may not be a metric. And if we cannot make that up, or perhaps it's not viewed in your favor for you to reveal it, because you're working for a organization that likes to keep those metrics close to, themselves, then we choose to not include it. And employers understand that.
Yeah. We also have a couple questions here about age and ageism, and to anyone who is concerned about that, we recommend that you attend our webinar coming up on how to job search after 50. That will be a really valuable one as well. But Madalena here asks, does it make a bad impression on a recruiter to not show your graduation year? And Craig also asks, should I include information on my resume that dates back to 1990? Like those experiences that are maybe a couple decades old, but are still relevant to positions that he's currently interested in.
Right. Number one, to answer that first part of the question, no, it doesn't look bad. It's more commonplace to not include. It's more of a norm to not include your graduation date in, I guess, today's society. It does pique curiosity. So the choice is yours. And as far as your second question, 1990, I would take that, and of course I wouldn't want to speak generalities to it, but what I would recommend you do is you take what that experience was that would be most relevant, and you reposition it such that it is within the qualification summary, and perhaps you leave that experience out because it is from 1990. But if, as an example, you have experienced, and this may or may not be relevant, but if, let's say, you have experience in growing a company at 50% year over year for 7 years, and that was from 20 years ago or so, or 15 years ago or so, you could position that as within one of your anchors as a relevant qualification summary versus the experience itself.
Yeah, great. Let's see here. We have a question here about sort of the job title that you mentioned. So is it okay to mention a different job title, for example, head of product, when the job actually mentions senior director or something like that?
I would, in that case, I would take the, I forget what it's, I would use the word product manager, whatever is most relevant, so that you're not ruled out. But I would still use that word product management within there, or whatever would be that key word.
Mm-hmm. We have a couple questions about the address or location. So firstly, you mentioned that you only state city and state on resumes. Why is it not necessary to include the home address anymore? And then if someone is interested in a job location that's in another state apart from where they're currently located, is there a chance that they would get rejected for not including, the location where the job is actually based?
Yeah. So to answer the first part of the question, which I think I'm drawing a blank on, so I'll answer the second part of the question. It is always if you are going to be applying for a job where they're requiring you to come into an office that is in that state, it is somehow recommended for you to be able to have a resume that has that state and on your resume. And that's where you can kind of finesse it, as if you knew somebody who lived in that state and you had intended on moving there, you can work around that, just because it helps increase your chances of, oh, this person is already within the vicinity of where we're looking to hire. It helps increase the chances. To answer your other question, which I think I'm remembering now, is where, in order to remove all of that altogether, if the more people removed their city and state from their resume, it makes it easier for us to all kind of have a better level playing field, although I don't know if that's true or not. But my point in saying it is, it's more commonplace for not to have city or state in there. But if you know it's going to give you of an advantage because they're headquartered there, then absolutely put it in there. If it is of integrity to the location you're in, and or you're going to be there within 30 to 90 days.
Great. What are your thoughts on functional resumes? We have a question from Alicia here. She says that she's heard they're useful in avoiding ageism and employment gaps, but recruiters might not necessarily, prefer them.
So I do chronological, just because I know that it is preferred from the recruiter to understand somebody's history. And it's also, when you look at when you're filling out some of these job applications online, even though you've submitted an application, it will then take you to another field where it will populate your information in terms of work history in chronological order. So I do prefer that, but I do also say, and you've seen it earlier in my presentation, that I offer a hybrid, in that there's that expertise in section, which helps call out right away and anchors in how you are functionally more relevant to the reader and the job description.
Yeah. And in terms of optimizing your resume for applicant tracking systems, how do you like to sort of write the skills section on your resume? Do you have a preference on how those skills are listed out?
Yeah, I include it, and you may have seen it. I include it right underneath the qualification summary. And because I often am in a position to have to save space, I don't write things like skills or expertise or core competencies. I just bundle those keywords and skills below the qualification summary. Technical skills, I do have a separate section for, and I tend to have that right beneath education.
Wendy asks, should I list only one job if I've been there for 15 years?
If you have, yes. And if you have another job that is relevant, or you have other work experience that is not relevant, you may want to include that other section that is called, other career experience, and you have one-liners for your other career experiences, because they might be interesting or provide some insight into your work history. And yes, if you do have a 1 year of working somewhere for X amount of years, having that qualification summary and that expertise in section could help provide some nice, clean branding to the impact that you had at that job that's most relevant to the position.
Absolutely. We have a couple people asking about, philanthropy or volunteer experience. So should you still include things like that on your resume, or even things like general interests?
Yeah, community service, volunteer leadership activities, absolutely. General interests, since I do recommend that people have LinkedIn profiles, and I do recommend that it's linked to the top of your resume, I reserve the general interests and the character, the narrative of who you are to your LinkedIn profile. So I tend to not include general interests in there.
Right. In terms of the education section, you mentioned how that's kind of important, and it especially showed up in that heat map. But Alicia asks, can you talk a little bit about mentioning, high school or high school graduation in your education section, especially if someone doesn't have higher education?
Right. So if you are if you have completed high school and you haven't attained a college degree, and you've been in the workforce, your workforce experience is what will provide you merit. So I don't think it's necessary to include high school as a call out in your resume. I would just personally leave that education section out, especially if you've had more robust work experience that could be relevant. Now, if you are in university and you're a freshman, we may choose, and you have a resume, which many do, you may choose to include the high school that you attended if there's some other merit-based achievement attached to it.
Maureen asks, so if a job description requires, for example, 10 years of experience, should I include experience that's older than 10 years?
If it only requires 10 years?
Yeah. So
Yes.
if the job description says like 10 years of experience in X.
Right. Yeah. So, and you have 10 plus years. Yeah. And perhaps within your call out, you might write 10 plus years of experience in, and you would include the experience that you have that's relevant and anything else that is relevant within the history of your work as well.
We have a couple questions relating to applicant tracking systems here. So Beth asks, it looks like those bar divisions are okay for applicant tracking systems like you showed in your previous examples. She says she was told by another resume writer that applicant tracking systems can only read round or square bullets.
Round or square bullets and not sections that divide.
Right. I think generally those bar divisions are okay. And they even help in breaking up the different sections of your resume a little better to make it easier to read.
Right.
Yeah. We have a question here that asks, should we use the exact language from the job posting if we have the skills, or should we be rewriting it but trying to keep the keywords the same when it relates to applicant tracking systems?
You want to finesse it so that it is readable, such that if you were to read it out loud, it makes sense if somebody else were to read it out loud. And you also want to do your best to mirror the words and the phrasing that's identified, that even Jobscan is able to help populate, that the ATS system may have as a flag to identify your relevance as well.
Yeah. I think it's important that you keep the language pretty natural in your resume and consistent. So for example, if like on your resume you have communication, but the job description says like communicated or something, I would try to keep the language on your resume the same and not try to sort of force it, if that makes sense.
Yes. I have, do we have a few minutes? I want to actually, I realize I didn't show some other components of the qualification summary that I can go
Yes,
through if you want. This will
absolutely.
be a quick snapshot. So I'm going to share screen again. And we are going to make this back into presentation mode. Okay, hold on one second. All right, so this is where I started explaining the qualification summary, which again is the stickiest part of the resume. And that's an opportunity that once you've revised your resume to a baseline, you can continue to customize moving forward to each opportunity. It's a nice section for you to have an impact statement that speaks to the scope of your experience, helps anchor in a niche that is relevant, provides a bit of essence to your character, and also includes some of those key words. So here's some examples. Here are some examples. So here is an individual who is seeking out an account director role within marketing communications. These could be placeholders. You can easily customize the function to what it is you've done or what it is you're pursuing, as long as it's of integrity. Again, this impact statement is easy for this individual to even say if they were at a networking meeting and somebody's like, oh, who are you? What have you done? Well, I've been managing brand activation accounts for Fortune 500 companies within pharma and healthcare. That's an easy thing that somebody might say in an elevator or at a business networking international meeting where they have 30 seconds to introduce who they are and what they've done. And then this next line goes into the scope of their experience. And then I've included some core competencies with key achievement statements. And of course, the keywords are below. So that's one example. This is another example of someone within HR that, again, has a bit of an impact statement and also calls out some of the most relevant competencies and also speaks to the scope of her experience, calling out the niche that she's in and that she continues to seek, continues to pursue, fast-growing startup medical device companies. Here goes back to that example of the chief product officer. So as you see here, this is an example where I haven't created this lengthy, robust section. This is more like that quick at a glance snapshot because I have a section below that is expertise in, where we call out those core competencies inclusive of the actual achievements that are supporting what we're saying about this person. Similar in this case as well. For a sales and marketing executive, leads commercial strategies to drive product launches, product profitability, and revenue growth within highly regulated industries. And the call out here in terms of a niche that makes this person specific and very uniquely positioned is the vast diagnostic and laboratory experience enabling solutions in biotech, pharma, food, and clinical markets. So I often get this question. Here's the question. What if I'm going from this industry? What if I've been entrenched in these two industries and now I want to go into this industry? Or what if I have a vast array of experiences across multiple industries? We have to take what you have and leverage that as your unique value, that you have vast experience that is across multiple industries. That is actually could be viewed as a strength among some companies, and we cannot hide from it, especially if that becomes true within your experience section. So let's just call it up at the top, acknowledge it, and begin to finesse language that expresses what you're capable of doing or what you've shown a fascination in immersing yourself in. So things of that sort. Here's that expertise section that I've showcased. Here are whether you call it expertise in or career highlights. The goal is for you to become, I'm going to stop sharing, to become really good at developing a repository of your 1-2 punch statements. I call them sometimes trophy statements that, or plaque, if somebody had given you a plaque, what's going to be on your plaque that you can recite or that you can include within a cover letter, within an expertise in section, or within even embedded somewhere within your LinkedIn profile.
Great, thank you, Alina. And we are actually at just about up on our time here, but we did have a couple people ask about, colors, graphics, and columns on your resume. For example, in your those examples you just showed, you used, I think, 2 colors. Do you have a preference on how you usually guide people, when it comes to their resume, fonts, colors, formatting, etc.?
Yeah, I don't use more than like a black font and another color, typically like a navy blue. I've seen some people who've wanted to change some of their font to match the branding. Like I worked with somebody who applied to Netflix and she wanted to change some of her font to red. I personally did not like red font, but that's what she decided to do. And really I wouldn't include more than 2 different colors. And then as font, I tend to stick to the traditional that could be read by word and not I forget what the word is, discombobulated in transition.
Yeah, I think a good rule of thumb to go by is just to keep it simple and easy to read. Great. Well, we are up on our time here, but thank you everyone for joining us today. And thank you again, Evangelia, for presenting. If you would like 20% off Jobscan Premium, you can go to the promo link that you saw in today's presentation, and John will also be dropping it into the chat. And that just gives you 20% off of a monthly or quarterly plan. And the quarterly plan does come with that 2-week free trial. So if you'd like, please also go check out all our other webinar topics at jobscan.co/no-fear. We definitely have some great topics and presenters lined up that we're excited about. But that is it for today's presentation. So I will leave the chat box open for a little bit longer as folks start filing out. But best of luck to all of you in your job searches.